Hello, my name is Yannick Pelletier. I am a Swiss Grandmaster and we are going to take a look in this video at a game from the first round of the Candidates Tournament in Berlin. That's the game between Aronian and Liren, and certainly Aronian before the tournament considered one of the favorites in this tournament. And he goes in this game for the throat with a very interesting, original, aggressive opening idea in the English opening, which we're going to take a look at this right now. Aronian then playing c4, knight f6, knight c3, e6, e4. This is already a sign that he wants a complicated, aggressive position on the board. d5, e5, d4, e takes f6, d takes f3, d takes c3, sorry, b takes c3, queen takes f6, and after d4 we've reached a position which has been played thousands of times, and hundreds of games between grandmasters have been played, and Liren had already tried before b6. Well, very natural. He wants to develop his queen side with a bishop on b7, and Aronian has devised now a special idea for this game. Instead of the usual developing moves like knight f3 or, for instance, bishop e2 first, this was considered as the main challenge of Black's idea: bishop e2 and then bishop f3, trying to exchange the bishops. Here you take with the knight, and White can actually hope to be very slightly better. But look at this move, h4, played by Aronian, neglecting the development, of course, but with special ideas in mind. Liren, bishop b7, bishop g5, queen f5, and, well, when you play h4, it's certainly not just to play bishop g5. You might also have ideas to develop the rook to h3 and bring it to the center this way. Well, of course, it means you basically have difficulties castling, but you know, you have other goals in mind, and those goals are to try to attack very quickly. Well, instead of this, Aronian played bishop d3, which turns out to be a novelty. Queen a5 and king f1. This is the idea he had in mind. If now Black takes the pawn on c3, well, this is going to be very, very dangerous. After knight e2, you know, the queen has already moved 1, 2, 3, and now 4 times in this game. It's a lot, and it has to move again to a5. And after c5, well, Black has just a pawn in his pocket, but all his pieces are not developed yet, and White can, you know, launch an attack very fast. I believe White has tremendous compensation here for the pawn, and wisely enough, the Chinese player went for knight c6, developing his knight. Rook b1 followed, and here again, if you take on c3, it's going to be dangerous. Knight e2. Well, after queen a5, the same idea as before, c5. Now you're going to make use of this square on b5 somehow. Either the bishop is going to come or the rook there. Well, in any case, this looks very dangerous. So queen a3 perhaps better. But then rook h3, you can see the other rook is being brought to the game through the third rank, and this is dangerous too. h6, bishop f4, long castle, and d5. Well, I've taken a look at this line, which appears to be extremely dangerous. Knight b4, bishop e4, queen takes a2, and just rook hb3, and we've just developed all pieces. We haven't really noticed that White hasn't been able to castle in this game. He's brought all his rooks. That's the main thing, actually. When you castle, it's not just for king's safety, but also to coordinate your rooks. Here, the king is safe, rooks are coordinated, everything has been reached extremely quickly, and White is on top. Well, again, I think Liren played not just the safest way, but also a very healthy move, f6. We'll see actually a hidden idea behind this move later on. Well, first of all, if White gives this check on h5, turns out to be bad because of king d8, and your bishop is pinned along the fifth file here. You can see the fifth rank. So he went back to d2, long castle. This was actually the idea. As soon as the bishop goes from g5, then you can castle long. And of course it seems as if black is playing with fire, castling into white's opening lines. But where should the black king hide? This is a very unclear question, because the king side is not safe either. So I believe this is a good move by Liren. And here Aronian plays a4. And now we can see that the main problem for Liren is actually his queen, because rook b5 is a big threat. The queen would have to go to a6 and then look at c5 here, opening the diagonal against the queen. The queen is in dire straits, and every square on the 5th rank is controlled by white's pieces or pawns. If you try and prevent rook b5 by playing a6, then rook h3 is coming. Bishop e7, for instance, and rook e7, and we can see that on this e-file the pawn on e6 is very weak, and actually white is probably going to almost win it very soon. Well, in this moment Liren played extremely well. He went e5. Oh, breaking open the center. White is attacking on the side, and basically when this happens in chess, when your opponent attacks on a flank, on a side, you should react in the center. This is exactly what the Chinese player is doing here. e5, trying to open files, and especially for the rook on d8. Well, Aronian didn't lose his cool. He played c5, and both players already need, at such an early stage in the game, to calculate plenty of difficult variations, especially for the first round of a tournament, a very tough situation. Bishop takes c5. This is good, of course. The d-pawn, d4, is pinned, because the bishop would be hanging on d3. Well, of course, Aronian hasn't blundered this pawn. He went rook b5, queen a6, and now rook h3, protecting this bishop. This is actually a problem also for white. This bishop wasn't protected, so that any move like rook takes c5 wouldn't really work because of queen takes d3. Well, now that the rook is on h3, this bishop d3 is protected, and all sorts of threats are, rising here in this position, and black needs to be very careful. For instance, e takes d4 would be a mistake. Rook takes c5. Black's only hope is to try and sacrifice the queen. B takes c5, but there is a check on g4 first. King b8, check, take on a6, check. And here, well, white has a choice, but he can actually play rook e1, and that's actually the reason why white gave a check on g4, that after rook e8 check, he has this square d1 free for his king. Bishop c8, queen g3, bishop takes h3, knight takes h3, and white is a piece up. Black has certainly 3 pawns for it, excuse me, just 2 pawns for it, so it's certainly not enough. And well, also bishop e7 is a little bit too shy, perhaps. Well, the refutation is not that easy to see, but d5 here is actually the good move for white, who remains in the driving seat. Actually, he's even much better here. Well, Liren played bishop takes d4, and as Aronian admitted after the game, he had actually, well, missed this idea, or actually when he played rook h3 started seeing that this was possible. I was commentating this game with Judith Palger live from Berlin, this very first round, and we were actually focusing on this game very much because we enjoyed how it unfolds actually. And after bishop takes d4, Aronian took his time and found the best move. Well, it would be bad to take on d4 here, because after rook takes d4, first of all, black has 3 pawns for the piece, and he has very, very active pieces. His only problem is the queen, but it appears that it is solved actually, because now, after for instance knight e2, there is queen takes a4, and black even has 4 pawns for the piece. It appears that black is slightly better here. Well, it's even worse, it would be even worse to play rook takes e5 here, trying to make use of this, discovery attack on the queen by any means. Well, here it really backfires after knight takes e5, takes the queen, check. Knight e2 has to be played. Bishop c5. And if you count material, black has rook and bishop for the queen, but he also has a pawn, and wholly he's so basically from the material point of view, black isn't really worse here, but all his pieces are well coordinated, well centralized. They are threats. The king on f1 isn't feeling well. Black is even clearly better. For instance, king g1, simply king b8. Black is better. Alternatives, well, I have looked at many moves here, even rook b1, but here bishop takes c3 is very strong, very strong. You can't really take the queen on a6 because there is a check. You know, you can even show that. Bishop takes a6, bishop takes a6. Next move is either bishop takes or rook takes d2. More or less the position is over here. Black would be winning. So you have to play bishop takes c3. Rook takes d3. If you take with the rook, simply e4. And after queen g4 check, king b8, queen takes e4, there is this very nice tactics here. Knight e5. Not only hitting the rook here, but also the queen. Black is winning again. And if you play queen takes d4, there is take here, takes, and bishop a6. You're threatening e4. If white protects the rook on d3, e4 is going to yield black a winning advantage. So he needs to play rook b5, knight e7, king e1, for instance, c6, and here black will be better. There was nothing really white could do, and if he takes on e5, takes rook g3, g6, well, black has two pawns in his pocket here, so he's clearly better. Finally, rook b2 is better than rook b1, but bishop takes c3 hits again, bishop takes, rook takes d3, queen takes d3, and it's actually the same variation because there is nothing better but to play rook b5 here. Aronian played the best move, I said it. It's bishop e2, removing the bishop from this dangerous file, d file, where the bishop can be hit anytime. So bishop e2, a good move. Here, one may be tempted because, well, it appears that this bishop on d4 is more or less going to be condemned. Bishop a8 here, and actually the computer is pretty happy about his position, the black position here. Yet, you know, we took a look at this during the live commentary with Judith Polgar, and she thought white is clearly better, and actually I agreed. Just the computer believes after rook d7 it's very unclear, but from a human point of view, you know, these two pieces, even though they had a threat mate on g2, they're not really happy there. Black has lost a bit of his activity, and for this reason I think Liren's decision was, from a human point of view, certainly better. Rook d6. Yet it appears that white, Aronian here, could have been better had he found the retreat to b2. He went to b1 in the game, but he could have gone to b2. We'll see, there is a small difference. Queen a5 takes the bishop. Queen d5. This is basically the main idea of black. D takes e5. Knight takes e5. But after knight f3, it appears that, you know, white has a piece for just two pawns. And even though, you know, black seems to be active and well centralized, white secures an advantage here. And it's very crucial that this rook is on b2, protecting the bishop on d2, so that after takes here, you can simply take back. Black cannot win the bishop. After rook b1 in the game, queen a5 was played. And here he decided to repeat moves with rook b5. If he takes, then we can see again the difference. Well, here, of course, you can't go for d takes e5. This is crucial. And you have to try rook b5, but after queen a2, things are very unclear. Rook c3, knight takes d4, you can see all pieces jumping around, and after bishop c4, of course, it appears the queen is almost lost. There is this nice little trick, knight b3. Well, the knight sacrifices itself for its queen, but the queen will be saved because the bishop on d2 is hanging, and black has 3 pawns for the piece. Things are not very clear here. I think Aronian wisely, you know, refrained from going for this variation. So he repeated move with b5. Here again he could have gone to b2, but here they agreed to draw. In this position, it's actually a very, very fascinating game, which lasted only 22 moves, but by no means a so-called grandmaster draw. A very, very tense fight with this original idea by Aronian in the opening, which eventually could have yielded him an advantage had he followed through correctly in right moment. But hats off as well to Liren, who found critical lines. You know, when you face such a surprise in the opening early on, you know, most of us tend basically to, you know, we might play a few good moves, but at some point we're going to crack and make a mistake. I don't think Liren made any mistake in this game. He actually played very, very forcefully, and so a shorter draw, but a very intense one. If you liked the content, please like the video and subscribe. Thank you very much for your attention.